Hello everybody, hope everybody's doing great today. Appreciate those of you watching this video. I hope you enjoy it. And today we were talking about the movie Big George Foreman. This was a movie I was hoping to see in the theaters, but once I got the time to go see it, it was already out of the theater, so I was glad to see it on Netflix. So I immediately watched it before Netflix took it down. Who knows how long it's going to be on there. But yeah, so let's talk about Big George Foreman. Of course, this is a biopic about George Foreman. It covers basically his whole life. So a lot of the events in his life are kind of like just summarized and glanced over. But you get the main picture. It hits the highlights of his life very well. This movie starts off when he's just a child, and we just see how humbled his childhood was. Right away, we see him, his family, his mother, single mother, move him into this broken down, run down house, and she has like one hamburger, and she kind of splits it up, I think 4 or 5 ways, and each kid basically gets a bite. So we see like just how poor his family started, and how rough his childhood was, and then it kind of just glosses over to like his teenage years, then how he got into boxing, and then kind of glosses over his career, and some of the highlights when he talks about his early career. We see like his Joe Frazier fight, and then it kind of moves on to the Muhammad Ali fight, and then we get to see his born-again Christian age, and then it covers his comeback, when he came back when he was 45, I'm sorry, not when he was 45, I believe it was like 37, 38-ish, around that age, and he won the belt once again when he was 45. Spoiler alert, but if you know George Foreman, you know his life, he won it when he was age 45, and that was kind of miraculous, really, because I think at that time, and maybe still, he was like the oldest champion ever, and the last time he won the belt was like 20 years ago, so it was kind of like a miraculous thing, especially for a boxer to be 45 years old and be able to be on top of your game at that age is incredible. And his life, when you watch this, he had an incredible life, considering that, the hardships that he had as a kid. I think that really built into his career and the toughness that he had, and his drive. A lot of people, when you are born that way, will kind of like give up into society and just accept the fact that, you're poor and life is too hard for you. But it was incredible to see that he had that drive to overcome those obstacles, and to really drove into his career, and how he was able to become like the best there was. I should also say it did also cover very briefly, his Olympic run that he had, and it touches a little bit about the impact. It was in '68, so it was in Mexico City. So, I can't remember the names, but you have those track athletes, they had the power fist with the black gloves on. And it touches a little bit how George Foreman kind of got ridiculed a little bit from the black community, because he was kind of like this American-loving type of guy. And you see how he was raised that way. His mother was really like God-fearing, and very religious and proud of the country and stuff like that he grew up in. So he didn't really appreciate the fact that people, at least this is how it's shown in the movie, that people kind of told him he was like a sellout, because of his patriotism, his love for his country. Did hit on that a little bit during that time period. We also kind of see a little bit of his, I'm sure that George Foreman growing up faced racism, but the movie never really touched upon this. It seems like it at times it tiptoed to that line, but never did cross it. A few instances what I want to talk about is like how, in that period, he's growing up in the 60s, it's a period of turmoil in the United States, basically with racial relationships. Got a fly flying in front of me, sorry. If you see that. Anyways, so kind of see like in the beginning, when he's just a kid at the very beginning of the movie, he's going to the school. It's all black kids. It's like kids, but the teacher's white, and she's asking kids to somebody to read out loud. And, George Foreman, he raises his hand up, but she doesn't pick on him, not choose him, not because he's black, but when she looks down and sees that his shoes are raggedy, she ends up choosing another black kid who's dressed nicely. George Foreman's clothes are kind of raggedy, kind of shirts kind of wore and stuff like that. And then we see how, because of his wealth status, how the other kids in his school kind of picked on him and stuff like that. And so we see kind of depicts, how he was picked on, not because of the color of his skin, but because of his wealth status. He was very poor, so she chose somebody who was more wealthy. And then you move on to when he goes to the Job Corps, and then we see there was a white guy who stole his shoes. And you see that, even though it was a white guy stealing a black man's shoes, it wasn't really racially motivated. It was just that George Foreman had these nice shoes that his mom bought him. And George Foreman, because of his background, he knows how hard his mom worked to get him these nice shoes and stuff like that. And then he meets his friend who later kind of becomes his money manager. And a lot of boxers, I'm going to say most boxers, but you get that boxing story where a boxer comes champion, gets all this wealth, and then he loses it all. Well, he has his friend that he trusts to handle his money and stuff, and his friend puts all his, buying all these stocks, so George Foreman thinks that, his money's secure. It turns out his friend was putting the money into these high-risk stocks, and so he loses all his money. And so you see and then later on, once he returns to the ring, there's a white guy yells out, he's at least fighting for all the fat, bald-headed guys type of thing. He was a white guy saying it, but it was stuff like that where, be somebody from a white guy saying stuff, but they weren't being racist or anything, but they weren't being, but they weren't being nice either, nice things were happening to him. But the movie kind of depicts that those things that were happening between white people and him were not really racially charged. And like I said, I'm not saying that George Foreman probably never faced racism. I'm pretty sure he probably did. But the movie doesn't really touch upon that part, the actions that his interactions with white people were a lot of racist type things. It's, not very good. People interacting with white people interacting with him, and the grievances that they did to him weren't really racially charged. That's kind of how I kind of picture this movie handling that, the dynamics between the two races during George Foreman's lifetime. This movie really picks out. Also, though, the highlight of this movie to me is you could say this is a religious movie, especially because it begins with his mother being very grateful for God for the little that they had. And we see that George Foreman at this time, he doesn't understand. He's why should we be grateful when, they don't really have anything to eat? They're barely getting by. And then when he becomes world champion, he's all about, this is what I did. God didn't really have much to do with that for me. And then we get to see his born again phase of his life, when he, and I guess, George Foreman, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, he had a lot to do with this. He helped them write the script and stuff. So we see after his last bout, I want to say it's the last bout, before he retired, the first time, he has this empathy that God wants him to change his life, and that Jesus is his savior, and it kind of, changes his life in a 180 degree. And then we see that great influence, and then how that helps him on his comeback, his religious belief, and this idea that God's going to help him become world champion again. I believe that part of the story was very well told, how that changed his life and made him a happier man. As he describes, he always was angry, but once he accepted God into his life, he became happier and more carefree. So you can say that this movie is kind of a religious movie. The second thing that's very important, I believe, it talks about is the importance of having mentors in your life, like positive mentors. We see when he's a teenager, him and his buddy were trying to mug a guy for his wallet. They thought he was drunk, ended up being a cop, so he kind of runs away from the policeman. But we see how he was starting to go into the wrong path, and how that kind of changed, especially when he saw the commercial for like the job course, and how he would be able to train to get the skills, and how he really wanted to be able to earn his money and work for it and acquire the skills he needed to be successful in his life. And there, you know, he needed, I guess you could say it's like his mentor, but the guy kind of really introduced him to boxing. And so he had this positive mentor in his life to kind of lead him into the right direction. His mom was a great influence on him, but you also need, apart from your family, sometimes you need that outside help to be helping you pull you through tough times. And we kind of see this and how important it is to have positive mentors, and how he passed that along as well. Once he got out of boxing, you know, he opened up his own little, what do you call it? I want to say shop, but it's not a shop. It's a little vocabulary. You know, I got a little vocabulary. He opened up his own little community center, so these youth could go in there and they could do sports and stuff, and they had a place to hang out, and so they could stay out of trouble and stuff like that. So he became mentor to hundreds or maybe probably thousands of youths himself. So he's kind of giving that goodwill to future generations and passing it on. Overall, I did enjoy this. I felt sometimes it kind of summarized his life a little bit too much. I wonder if it would have been better if it focused on like his fight with Michael Moore, and we got to see his life through like flashbacks, like kind of tuck it in that direction where, you know, he's getting prepared for a Michael Moore fight, but we can see how the trials he had in his his earlier life prepared him for this fight to take on Michael Moore and win. I wonder if it would have been better if they did it through that lens instead of the way they did it, because like sometimes I feel like it was too fast. Like, it's just a great summary of George Foreman's life, and sometimes a lot of things just got glossed over very quickly, just so they could get from age 10, 12 to age 45. But I did find it interesting. I liked it. If you're a George Foreman fan, I highly recommend this. It's not the best boxing movie ever, you know. Some of the in-ring stuff, it's not the best fighting stuff going on in the ring. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I think this is something you should check out. I would highly recommend this. Just a quick note before I go off. I do remember when he came back, I was just a kid. I was about preteen years when he was coming back. So I do remember like a lot of commentaries making fun of him coming back, you know, saying, because he was kind of out of shape and stuff, as it shows in the movie, and kind of giving him no shot at all of really doing anything when he came back. But I enjoyed it. I remember getting the pay-per-view when he fought Tommy Morrison. I just remember that time period, and thanks to YouTube, I could go back and watch him when he's back in his prime as well, and see him back in the 70s, when he was kicking butt. And then I do remember a little bit when he came back for the second time around. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the movie Big George Foreman. I believe you enjoy it. It's very inspirational, which is good. It gives you a good positive note, and there's a lot of life lessons you can learn from it. So have a great day. Bye.